Wow, thank you so much for that incredibly warm welcome. It's absolutely wonderful to have all of you here today to officially start my inauguration week at the State University of New York at Stony Brook, the #1 public university in New York. That wasn't in my notes, but I had to say it anyway. So, and doing this event on our Southampton campus is truly remarkable as well. So, in addition to this event kicking off a special week of inauguration events, this fireside chat officially starts our Stony Brook Southampton dialogues that we will begin hosting regularly on our campus. These dialogues, along with that, oh, okay, I'll take a pause for that. Stony Brook, Southampton should be the place for intellectual engagement of our community. And that's why we want to hold these dialogues regularly, along with other programming that will support our ambition to elevate this, our Southampton campus, as a vibrant resource for intellectual and cultural engagement for the whole East End community. I like this person who's applauding. Thank you for kicking off the applause. Now, turning to my distinguished guest, I am so thrilled and grateful and deeply honored to welcome John B. King Jr. as my guest for this first inauguration event and the first Stony Brook Southampton Dialogue. John King really needs no introduction, but I'll introduce him anyway. He's the 15th Chancellor of the State University of New York, also known as SUNY, which is the largest comprehensive system of public higher education in the United States, consisting of 64 campuses across New York. SUNY was created 70 years ago by visionary elected officials to ensure opportunity, access, and upward mobility for all New Yorkers. And it has delivered on this mission in incredibly impactful ways. As a newbie to SUNY, I have found SUNY to be a powerful institution with outstanding and committed leaders and supporters. And I'm grateful to Chancellor King and to the SUNY trustees for entrusting me with the presidency of Stony Brook, for their partnership in elevating our university and the entire State University of New York system as a whole to enhance our excellence and impact across education, research, healthcare, and service. So I want to thank SUNY leadership for attending this event, including SUNY trustee Stoller, whose vision, wisdom, support, and friendship has been invaluable to SUNY, to Stony Brook, and to me throughout my time as president. Thank you, trustee Stoller. Now, I'm not just saying this because he's my boss. SUNY is immensely fortunate to have John King as its chancellor. His compelling personal and professional journey is remarkable and inspiring. And Chancellor King has spent his entire career bettering the state of education and the student experience on a local, regional, and national scale. I found his leadership of and vision for SUNY to be deeply motivating to me and uplifting to all of us. John, it's truly a pleasure and honor to work alongside you in elevating Stony Brook and SUNY together as a powerful force for upward mobility, discovery, innovation, prosperity, and service here in our great state. Thank you for your partnership. And I'm looking forward to our conversation this afternoon. And let's start with that incredibly inspiring story, your story. You have a remarkable and inspiring journey to becoming the 10th U.S. Secretary of Education and now the Chancellor of SUNY, including your personal and professional observations about the impact of teachers on the students they educate and mentor. Tell us about your professional journey. Did you ever expect to become Secretary of Education or the leader of the largest university system in the country?
Thanks, Andrea. Well, first, let me say we are so lucky to have you as president at Stony Brook, and it's a privilege to kick off this exciting inauguration week with you, and it's always wonderful to be with the Stony Brook community. Guess what, to answer your question, I have to start with my childhood and my experiences as a kid. I grew up in New York City in Brooklyn. Both my parents were Brooklyn in the house. Bo-
Our son lives there.
both my parents were career New York City public school educators. My mom was a teacher and a school counselor. She's actually a school counselor in my elementary school, so I was very well behaved in elementary school. And my dad was a teacher and administrator. And they spent their whole lives working in New York City schools, but they couldn't have known the impact that schools, public schools, would have in my life. They both passed away when I was a kid. My mom when I was 8, and my dad when I was 12. And in the period when it was just my dad and me, my dad was struggling with Alzheimer's, and nobody knew, just the two of us in the house. And so home was scary and unstable. Some nights my father would talk to me, some nights he wouldn't say a word. Some nights he'd be angry, sometimes sad, sometimes violent, and I didn't know why. And so home was very hard. But school was this amazing place of safety and stability. And it was teachers at PS 276 in Canarsie and Mark Twain Junior High School in Coney Island that saved my life. If not for the structure and the nurturing they provided for me, I don't think I would have survived that period. And, then I moved around different family members, different schools, but it was always teachers give me a sense of hope and purpose. And so that's really what drove my professional life. When I was in college, I had the experience of working in after school and summer programs for young people, and I really liked being able to try to do for other kids what teachers had done for me. And so I decided to become a high school social studies teacher. And I loved being a high school social studies teacher. And, I think if things had fallen differently, I'd probably still be in my high school social studies classroom today. But I always was interested in figuring out how to make systems work better. So even as a teacher, I had my little critique of how things were run in the school, and thought, oh, if I could run it, I would do it this different way. And so I think that's part of what ended up driving me thinking about scale and how do you serve more students better. That ended up driving me to become a principal and eventually commissioner of education for New York State. But that moment, I think about sometimes that moment when President Obama and I walked out for him to announce that I was Secretary of Education. And that was unimaginable to me as a kid. A lot of times as a kid, I wasn't sure I could see a future for myself. Home was so hard. And one of the great blessings of my life was in that moment to be able to talk about Alan Osterwile, my teacher in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, and then for him to be at my swearing in as secretary. Because if not for him, there's no chance I would have had those opportunities. I don't know that I'd be alive today. And he had such an impactful role in my life. And so the journey to SUNY is sort of a natural extension of that, because I think about our 64 campuses, our 390,000 students. I hope the same way that Mr. Osterwile thought about his 4th grade classroom at PS 276 and trying to figure out how do we make sure that we do everything we can to support the success of our students.
Yeah, wow, what a beautiful story. I think that deserves a round of applause. Thank you for sharing such a personal story. And it's interesting. One of the very few things I don't like about being president is I don't get to teach. I don't get to be in the classroom. And I like to say when I retire from this job a long time from now, I want to go back to teaching, because the impact that you have on a student is so profound, and you see them grow and blossom, and there isn't anything more impactful than that. But also for me, why did I rise up from being a teacher and a researcher that I loved to take this role is bigger impact, that you can impact more people. And that's the best reason to become a leader. And that's part of the reason why I think we feel so fortunate to have you. So thank you. So you just talked about your teacher. What was his name again?
Mr. Osterwald.
Osterwald, and other educators who recognized your potential before you fully saw it in yourself or saw anything about your future. I know that feeling myself. People taking a chance on you when you don't know that you're worthy of that chance. My own PhD advisor, Praveen Faraya, took a chance on me when he admitted me to Berkeley, despite imperfect grades and test scores. In fact, the person in charge of it, supporting diverse admits to engineering at Berkeley told me I was barely admissible, and yet my advisor let me in. And it changed, obviously, the trajectory of my life. So the idea of taking a chance on someone, the people that took a chance on you, and nurturing their potential is so powerful. How does your own experience in being lifted up by others' belief in you, even before you saw it in yourself, shape the way you think about supporting our many, many students and ensuring their success, especially when you can't do it one-on-one? It has to be a bigger endeavor.
Yeah. Such an important question. And, one of the things that I've struggled with sometimes is, sometimes when I share my personal experience and people hear it as an affirmation that all the systems are okay how they are, like, well, you made it, so everything must be fine. And I actually think it's the opposite. I was incredibly lucky that there were the right individuals who intervened in my life at the right moment. And I don't think it should be left up to luck. We should create systems that ensure that those supports are there for all students. And that's how I think about our work at SUNY, and certainly how I think about the work that you're doing at Stony Brook. One of the things I love to say about Stony Brook is that the graduation rate for Pell students is higher than the graduation rate overall.
That's also one of the things I love to say too.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
incredible. And
Remarkable.
that speaks to systems of support. One of the things that is unique about my experience is that I'm the first U.S. Secretary of Education who have been kicked out of high school. And
That deserves a rest.
and I got kicked out of high school because I was angry. I was angry as a teenager. Like many young people who've experienced trauma, I was angry about the things that had happened to me as a kid. I felt let down by the adults in my life, and I got in a lot of trouble. And it would have been very easy for folks to write me off, to say, here is Black, Latino, male, family in crisis, no respect for authority. What chance does he have? But I was very lucky that there were teachers and a school counselor and some family members who were willing to give me a second chance. And again, that was luck. That was a blessing. But we don't have good systems around that. We lose a lot of young people. We lose out on a lot of talent in our society because we don't have the right systems in place. So I think a lot about what are the structures we can create. So one structure we can create is making college affordable for folks, right? And the fact that our tuition at SUNY is $7,070 for the year is extraordinary. And that reflects a tremendous commitment from the state, but it makes college possible for more people. Another thing we can do is we can have supports for students, like the EOP program, like the Simon Scholars, right? We can have programs that make sure that students who may be first in their family to go to college, students who may have come from difficult economics circumstances, have the supports, the advising, the coaching, the person who taps them on the shoulder and says, you didn't do as well as you want in that paper. That's okay. That happens. The question is what you're going to do about it. You should go to the writing center. You should go to office hours, right? And so I'm very pleased that together we are working to increase those structures of support for students. I'm here because people didn't give up on me. I don't want to give up on any of our students.
Yeah, it's a great story. And another thing we have in common, I didn't get kicked out of high school, but I left high school early because I was in a terrible high school, and I went to a community college. And that's where I found the best teachers probably in my entire career. And I don't know that I would have gone on to college. The reason I left high school, it was so bad. I thought if I stay in high school, I won't go to college because my whole view of education is so negative. And then I go to this community college where the teachers were inspiring and believed in me. I got into Berkeley because they wrote me letters of recommendation. So it's, and I know we have one of our wonderful SUNY presidents in the audience here. We were just in Albany and had a bunch of the Suffolk Community College students. And I said, how many are going to Stony Brook? And a bunch raised their hands. So I'm very happy about that. And I think it speaks to the power of the SUNY system, which is very different than any other system in the country because we have community colleges, the comprehensives, and the research universities as well, which creates a system for everyone. And that's one of the things I found so incredibly powerful about SUNY, that not every student should go to a 4-year college right away. If they can build up the confidence and find the right teachers and mentors in community college, then they're much more likely to be successful going on to college. So we do have a powerful system. And I guess maybe can you talk a little bit about how you see the SUNY system? Sorry, I didn't ask this question in advance, but I'm sure you've been asked it before. How does the system allow you to create mechanisms to ensure student success that would be more difficult in another type of system?
Yeah, I think we're able to say quite accurately that there is a place at SUNY for every New Yorker. And it may be that you are 18 and you haven't quite figured out what you want to do next. We have an answer for that. It may be that you are 18 and you are certain that you want to be a nurse or a vet tech or work in advanced manufacturing. We got a place for you. It may be that you're 18 and you think you want to be an engineer or you want to get a degree in sociology or in English. We got you. If you really are interested in agriculture, we've got Cobleskill and Morrisville and Alfred State. We have pathways. I was at Morrisville on the day they announced that they were getting new electric milkers. I mean, the room erupted in applause. Now, as a kid from Brooklyn, that was quite a shocking experience.
I can't even envision what an electric milker looks like.
But so, we've got that for you. If you want to get an MBA or a PhD or go to law school or go to medical school, we've got that for you at SUNY, and it is affordable, right? That we can deliver affordable excellence to everyone. But it's not just 18-year-olds. We have the programs for the 25-year-old, the 45-year-old, the 65-year-old, and we are able to offer such a wide variety of academic programs, degree programs. We have 390,000 students in degree programs, but we see more than 1 million students a year across all of our workforce development programs, our micro-credentials. That is an incredible asset for the state, and I think it supports economic development for the state, but also supports just quality of life. So we're lucky to have that system, and we are lucky to have the relationships within it so that you have these smooth pathways so that students can start out with President Bonahue at Suffolk Community College and smoothly transfer to Stony Brook without losing a bunch of credits, knowing that the courses they took at Suffolk are going to help them advance in their major at Stony Brook. But similarly, the Stony Brook student knows if they want to go to law school, they have the opportunity to go to UB Law School. Or if they want to become an optometrist, they can go to SUNY Optometry, where we train all of the newly licensed New York optometrists, right? So that knowing that there's that interconnectedness is a huge value, I think, for students.
Yeah, and one thing that people may not know about is our prison program, which I think is remarkable, that we go into prisons, we get people degrees. And when you think about people that didn't have a teacher like you did to help them stay on track and ended up going off track and may end up in prison, And they have this program where they can get back on track. They can get a college degree. They can create a life for them and their families. It's remarkable. That's one of the programs I find absolutely one of the most
Absolutely.
inspiring of SUNY.
Absolutely. If you want to have an experience that affirms your belief in the transformative power of education, go to a graduation in a prison. Because one of the things that's so powerful is uh, how changed the students are by the experience of study, of being taken seriously by their professor, having rich conversations with their classmates in this incredibly difficult setting. But the other thing that's so inspiring at those graduations is to watch the parents, the kids, the partners who come to support their loved one who's graduating, and seeing how transformed their view of their loved one is by seeing them at that graduation. It's incredibly inspiring, and it's good for the students, it's good for communities, it's good for society, and it reflects our public service mission at SUNY.
Absolutely. And I'm coming up on my first graduation next month, and I have the same sentiment about first gen kids. Our kids went to a public high school in California where about half the kids were first gen to graduate high school. Their parents had not graduated high school, and watching the kids and the families. And now for Stony Brook, where 40% of our students are first in their family to go to college, I just can envision what it's going to be like for not just the kids, but their families to see their kid get a college degree and all that means for their future. So let me shift a little bit to talking about how SUNY and Stony Brook can prepare students for a world where the pace of change in technology and especially in AI accelerates so quickly.
Mm-hmm. It's a huge challenge for Stony Brook, for SUNY, for the higher education sector. You know, I think about it on sort of 4 levels. One, we've got to make sure that students have a basic understanding of what AI is, how it operates, and how it is emerging as a tool in our society. And so that's why we're adding AI to our information literacy general education requirement. So working with faculty across the system and faculty fellows who we have funded to support their colleagues in this work, we are changing our gen ed requirements starting in the fall of 2026. Every SUNY undergraduate will have exposure to AI as part of our information literacy work. So that's at the most basic level, right? But then second, we've also got to realize that careers are changing, jobs are changing. I saw one study suggesting over 30% of the American workforce will be regularly interacting with AI within a year. I don't know if that's quite right. That seems very, very aggressive in terms of the timeline, but I think it is directionally right that increasingly AI will be present as a tool in the workplace, and we have to prepare our students for that world. And so that means in each discipline, we've got to ask, how is AI going to be a tool when students leave us, and how do we prepare them? And so we have a system-wide faculty committee that's working to provide resources and tools as every department thinks through this really important question. Third, AI is going to enable some incredible advances in particular fields like healthcare research. And we have our Empire AI project that's based at University of Buffalo, but all of our research universities are a part of it, along with Cornell and Columbia, NYU, as you know. And we're investing now about $500 million in public and private resources in computing power based at UB, available to researchers across the system, so that we can lead the way in better treating disease through the use of AI as an analytic tool, so that we can lead the way in using AI to better predict extreme weather events, so that we can mitigate the consequences of climate change. So there's, I think, a leadership opportunity. But the fourth dimension, and this to me is the hardest, is what does it mean to live a fulfilling, rich life in a world of AI? And that to me is about the broader gen ed curriculum. That is to me about philosophical questions. Like what does the good life look like? It's about relational questions. How do I build real, meaningful human relationships? It's about the extracurricular activities on campus. It's about helping students find their community, um, and we can't lose sight of that important fourth element, because that's core to our mission in higher education, to prepare our students to not just get a good job, but to thrive in their life after college.
Absolutely. And one of the things, I'm an engineer. I've actually worked with AI. I've written a book with AI in my field. And, there's extremes of people that say it's going to replace every job in the next 5 years, or we'll have superhuman intelligence in our pockets in the next 5 years. And then there's skeptics who've said, we've been here before. I mean, AI has been around since the 50s, and it's been said since the 50s that exactly those comments would happen within 5 years, and it didn't happen. And where AI is going to go in terms of replacing jobs, we don't know yet. It's still very early. It's a new wave of that technology. But I think what you said at the end, the fourth thing, we need our students to be intellectually rich. They need a broad education. They need to develop the truly human attributes that AI will never have, of creativity and vision, collaboration, instincts. These are things AI will never have. And if we create that, and it's somewhat intangible, as you said, it's not necessarily something you teach. Human relations. I mean, we all remember a world with COVID and we were all on Zoom. That was awful compared to having everybody here in this room. There's something intangible about human connections. And that's what our students create on our campuses: connections with each other, connections with their teachers, with their mentors. And if we do that well, I think we will equip our students to be AI proof, or to be prepared for an AI economy where their unique education inside and outside the classroom, coupled with their knowledge of using this AI tool, will make them stand out and thrive in this new world, not just in the workplace, but also in their personal lives as well.
That's right.
So we have a lot of work to do, but it's wonderful to be on that journey, and to have such a big system in which to try things out in that domain. The other thing that I view AI as useful for, going back to student success, is as a tool to figure out why aren't our students thriving, or which ones aren't thriving, and which interventions might work. We don't need to just rely on what we've already done. We can look at data from around the country, around the world. So I do think it's a tool that we can use to improve student success. But like any use of a new technology tool, it's fraught with peril. So it could be we make some fits and starts before we figure out how to use it well.
I think that's right. And we have a pilot that we're doing around AI tutoring, because I think AI could be a very useful resource to help students who need additional academic support. And we also have a pilot around AI advising, because I think there's ways in which AI can help students figure out their pathway through course selection and so forth. But we have to do all of that very carefully. And I think we have to gather constant feedback from students. We have to be willing to admit when something isn't working.
Right.
We've got to test and learn as we enter this new era.
That's right. And then just a bit of a plug for the SUNY AI Symposium, which is taking place on Stony Brook's campus Tuesday and Wednesday, which is going to dig into some of the ways that AI is a tool for research. So hopefully some of you can attend that. So let's move to a broader question. Certainly I've been asked, and I'm sure you've been asked, why would you want to be a leader in higher education today, given this relatively disruptive moment? So what challenges, well, I can ask you that question first, but I'll couple it with, what challenges and opportunities do you see facing higher education today? And how can university leaders meet these challenges and seize these opportunities?
I mean, I have to say, I mostly see opportunities. I know people are stressed out. I was just saying to a friend that when I go to college president meetings or system leader meetings, I have to be careful not to smile too much, because people are feeling downtrodden. But I actually feel great about what we get to do. Some of that is a privilege of being in New York, where we have a governor and a legislature who are absolutely committed to public higher education and have been, yes, it's very important. And, we're lucky, not only compared to red states, but red states, purple states, blue states are going backwards on investment in public higher education, but not in New York. And so that's been extraordinary that we have that level of commitment. I think about, we were together not that long ago announcing a $300 million investment in quantum at Stony Brook. That's incredible. That's the state saying we're going to bet on the future of public higher education. So we, I think, are very fortunate in that sense. We are also, I think, fortunate to have a governor and attorney general who are willing to stand up for our core values as a system. We believe in diversity. We believe in inclusion, and we're going to keep fighting for those things. And we're always going to follow the law. But so I realize I get to smile in part because of we have that backdrop. But I also am smiling because what we get to do is so extraordinary. When I spend a lot of time on campuses, as you know, and you talk to students where the educational experience they're having at SUNY is going to change their lives. So many young people at Stony Brook, as you described, they're first in their family to go to college. It's going to change the economic trajectory of their family. It's going to open up possibilities for them that their parents only dreamed of. That's amazing. And we get to be, each of us, a small part of that. What a blessing. So I mostly see opportunities, but there's no question there are threats. I think three that I know keep us both up at night. One is there has been this attack on the federal partnership with universities around research, which I think is very dangerous. Dangerous to the pursuit of knowledge and dangerous to the economic competitiveness of the United States, and dangerous to people's well-being. The attacks on NIH, for example, and the delays in NIH spending have set back research on cancer and Alzheimer's and heart disease. It's so counterproductive. It's hard to make sense of. And these are not partisan issues. We should all understand the urgency of the pursuit of knowledge through research on our higher ed campuses. So I worry a lot about that. I'm glad that Congress, in a bipartisan way, has maintained the commitment to research funding, essentially holding research funding level in this most recent budget. But will the agency spend it?
Yeah.
And will they create processes that reward merit and actually invest the dollars with the universities that are demonstrating the best evidence that they'll be able to succeed in advancing knowledge? So I worry a lot. That's one big challenge. I think the best thing we can do is continue to put proposals in, continue to recruit great faculty who are great researchers. We also need to get the state to help us more on the research side, and we need to get industry and philanthropy to help us on the research side. But we can't slow down in our goals around research. A second major threat is around the this message that is being propagated that college doesn't matter, that students don't really need college. It's very dangerous. It is counter to the evidence. The evidence is very clear that folks with a bachelor's degree on average are going to earn $1 million more over their lifetime than those without. Is the current job market harder than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Yes. And we have to help our students prepare for that. But we have to be clear that college is a tremendous economic value add. It is also a personal value add in the kind of life that you're going to be able to lead. The evidence is your health outcomes, your civic participation all go up if you have a college degree. So that is a real threat, and we've got to combat that. The third, I would say, is maybe a bit self-inflicted by higher education. I think there's a public skepticism about higher education institutions and whether or not they are advancing the public good. And we have to show people that we are. Part of that is the economic development case. Part of that is showing that we're preparing good citizens who are engaged in our democracy, who are prepared to be discerning voters, and uh, and that they're going to be of service to the community. One of the things I'm very proud of that the governor has supported us on is our Empire State Service Corps. A number of Empire State Service Corps students at Stony Brook. These are students who are doing 300 hours a year of paid public service work. They are tutoring K-12 schools. They're working on food and housing insecurity on campus and in the community. We have 500 students doing that now. The governor has proposed in her budget doubling that to 1,000 students. And we have many, many more students who want to serve. And I think that's part of how we send them a clear message that our institutions are good neighbors and good parts of the community. And we push back on this skepticism about higher ed. We also have to be vigilant about anti-Semitism. We have to be vigilant about making sure that students understand there, of course, is free speech and the right to protest, but your protest cannot interfere with other people's education, right? And so there were some self-inflicted wounds for the sector in not being vigilant enough, but I think we are trying at SUNY to send a different message.
Yeah, so thanks. There's a lot there, and I'll just say I'm also an optimist. I think you are as well. And for me, the reason to be a university leader right now, there's never been a more important time in a sector where I've spent my entire career. You have as well. It's under threat in ways that it hasn't been before. And yet we see the good that it does every day. And so being in a position to articulate that and to mitigate some of the self-inflicted wounds. I mean, the public perception of universities being a force for good has been declining for over a decade. It isn't just recently. And as a sector, this is something that we should have paid attention to before. It is somewhat baffling to me because you stated the statistics, and as someone who spends all my time in the university, we see the good that happens every day and the students, how they come in and how they leave. One of the things about Stony Brook, we're in the Carnegie classification as one of the top universities for upward mobility, that students come in the bottom 20% income-wide, and they leave with the ability to be in the top 20%. We're the only AU top 70 research universities in that category. You quote that statistic and you say, how can you not think that universities are forces for good? So why do you think we lost so much credibility with the general public? I mean, there are things about the anti-Semitism and protests, but that was relatively recent also. It seems like this has been going on for at least a decade.
Yeah, look, I think there's declining faith in institutions generally. If you look across institutions, whether it's political parties or healthcare institutions or the military, just general faith in institutions today is lower than it was 10, 15 years ago, and much lower than it was 20, 25 years ago. So higher ed has been a part of that broader national trend. But then I think there are some specific things in higher ed. But people worry a lot about the cost. And people took on a lot of debt. And we have to reckon with that. Now, that wasn't SUNY, I will say.
Not at $7,000.
Right? Because we've stayed affordable. But there are a lot of students walking around with debt they will never be able to pay. I think about there was this online master's in social work that USC was hawking. That's the way I would describe it.
Mhm.
And the price was astronomical. And then you look at what folks earn with an MSW, the prospects of someone being able to pay that degree, those debts off, pay for that degree, were very, very dim. That's a problem. That was a setup for students. I think about some of the predatory for-profit colleges that charged students a ton, left them with no degree, no meaningful credential. Um, and I get why people are then angry. And if you go in certain communities, almost everyone knows somebody whose life has been derailed by college debt. We have to own that. That's, I think, been a major factor in this declining confidence. And then we both have affiliations with Ivy League institutions. I think the most selective colleges in the country have allowed themselves to become very disconnected from the country. When you have a campus, and we've both seen this, where there are more students from the top 1% than from the bottom 60%, that is a problem. When campuses seem hostile to intellectual diversity, viewpoint diversity, that I think causes a loss of public confidence. And so those are self-inflicted, but they're solvable. And I think SUNY and Stony Brook are particularly well positioned to distinguish ourselves from some of those things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, both because of the makeup of our student body, but also because I think that we have created, and at Stony Brook, I think we benefit a lot from being part of the system because we can tap the wisdom of 64 presidents and the chancellor and everybody else and think about how do we navigate these really disruptive times? If we have a protest on our campus, if we have an event that seems divisive, even just in the title alone, um, I think we have the right policies and procedures in place. We've learned the lessons from what happened over the last several years to say, freedom of speech is important, freedom of expression is important, but we have policies and procedures to make sure that you're not preventing students or faculty or others from doing their own events, or you're not creating an environment where people don't feel that they can thrive, that they don't feel that they belong, that they feel that they're targeted. And of course, we have events that happen where we have to deal with that. But I think we have the right approach. That's my sense as being a president for 8 months. Is there anything you think we could be doing better on that particular issue?
One thing I'm excited about that I think builds on that work that you just described is, in addition to the AI and information literacy change to our general education curriculum, we also, starting in fall of 26, will now require competency in civic discourse as part of our general education requirements. I think of that as the sort of we have the rules to try to prevent people from doing the wrong thing, but I also think we need the positive work to help students better understand what does it look like to be a engaged, respectful citizen. And I as we have faculty fellows, again, who are working with their colleagues to integrate that content into courses, but it's having people learn to disagree agreeably, right? To disagree in a way where you're not just waiting for your turn to say your piece, but actually listening to what the other person is saying, where you're looking for opportunities to challenge your own assumptions, not just the assumptions of the person you're arguing with. It's the habits of mind of how do you ethically engage in the discourse that's going to advance our democracy. I was sharing with some faculty members earlier this week who are working on this that one of the things I think about when I think about that civic discourse work is this incredible opportunity I had when I was secretary to go down to Alex Haley's farm, which is in Clinton, Tennessee. Alex Haley of Roots and Autobiography of Malcolm X. He had this incredible farm, and it was purchased by the Children's Defense Fund, which was run by Marion Wright Edelman, who was a civil rights activist as a kid. And I went down to Alex Haley's farm to talk to a group of young people they were bringing together to train to do summer programs in high needs communities. And I'm on Alex Haley's farm. It's this incredibly beautiful space. And I get to sit on the porch of the main building of the farm with Marion Wright Edelman. We're in rocking chairs. And she starts to tell me about the movement. She said, "You want to hear some stories about the movement?" And I said, "Yes, I do."
Yeah.
And it was just such a blessing. And Marion started talking about how before they would take an action, before they would engage in an action, the work that they would do, that they would gather to pray, to read, to better understand what the goal was of the action, to understand the legal context, the moral context, the philosophical context. And I contrast that with some of what we see today on both sides of the aisle on every issue. People making outrageous assertions on social media grounded in no information at all, right? And then carrying that out into the street where they are sometimes engaged in violence, but without understanding what the underlying issues are and their complexity. That is not in the tradition of the civil rights movement. This was a very different way to think about the ethics of protest, even. And it was such a moving conversation. It made me think about a conversation I had with John Lewis, where he was describing walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And you think about, what did it take to have the disciplined belief in nonviolence to walk across that bridge knowing you were going to get beat for standing up for the right of Black people to vote. And part of what I take from that conversation with Marion about John Lewis is that disciplined action of nonviolence required disciplined study of nonviolence. It required disciplined understanding of the Gandhian tradition, right? And so that is part of what I hope for from this Gen Ed work, is that we can get students thinking about what are the responsibilities of your speech. You have a right to speak, but what are the responsibilities that come with that?
And the impact, it's interesting because when I was watching all the protests unfold over the last few years, I mean, I was born in Berkeley. I remember the soldiers marching down Telegraph Avenue and on the flowers in People's Park. And those protests changed the world for the better, as did the civil rights movement and the women's suffrage movement. So protesting inherently has had such positive impact on this country. And when I was watching the protests, it's what you described, that the people protesting really didn't understand the issues, that they were the complexity of the issues. You think about the Middle East. And I think part of that is social media, that students used to come to the university to learn, right? They didn't come to teach their teachers and their fellow students a particular point of view. They came to learn. They came to engage with people that have different viewpoints than their own, and evolve their own thinking about things by engaging deeply in these intellectual communities. And I think that has been impacted for the worse by social media, that people come to our campuses as young people with much more set ideas than they did 10 or 20 years ago. And that is our responsibility, to engage them and say, be open-minded, have a dialogue with someone that disagrees with you. And one of the things I tell our students and our faculty as well is, you never know what the person that you're working for or married to is going to believe. And you have to be able to engage with people that have different viewpoints if you want a rich, full life filled with people that enrich your life with many different things. And so I think that is one of the most important responsibilities that we have right now as educators, is pulling students back from coming in with all these set ideas and looking at college again as a place to learn, not just a place to make statements or protest with placards. So it's a really interesting time, and I think that leads into my next question. And we talked about the cost of college, and it's not just predatory universities, right? I mean, if you go to a Princeton or a Stanford or any private university that isn't even in the top echelon, there's a lot of kids that are not graduating with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. So it really does derail them. And so I view this as a moment where public universities can actually step forward and articulate the value of higher education broadly, public and private. So that's just one role of public universities at this particularly interesting time, if you will. We live in interesting times. So how do you see the role of public universities today and over the next decade?
Yeah, let me tell a quick story on the start of that. So I was in a coffee shop in Brooklyn last weekend. I had my Stony Brook fleece on,
Yay, okay.
and
Let's give him more slag here.
guy comes in. He was in a Verizon uniform. He comes in and he saw me and he said, "Oh, do you work at Stony Brook?" And I said, "Well, I'm the chancellor for SUNY, and Stony Brook is one of the campuses." And
Maybe next time just say yes.
yeah. And he said, "My cousin went to Stony Brook, loved it, had a great experience." And I said, "Oh, that's great. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to hear that." And he said, "That's what I should have done." And I said, "Oh, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well, I went to school out of state. I shouldn't have done that. I should have gone to Stony Brook. And now I have all this debt. And so that's why I'm working on Sunday."
Great story.
Right? I mean,
That is
it's, I
sorry for
mean,
you
it
to
just,
tell, yeah.
you know, it was very, and he just was being honest about the situation he was in. So I think one of the roles that we can play, again, is to deliver that affordable excellence, to make sure that every family in New York knows if you want to get an outstanding education, you can do so at SUNY affordably. And folks need to know that. I don't think they always do.
They don't.
And there's a lot of deception in how colleges talk about their price. A lot of the private institutions send you a letter that says, "We've awarded you a $30,000 scholarship." The letter doesn't say the tuition is $70,000. And so that scholarship is just a price reduction, but still really expensive, right? So part of what we have to do, I think, as public institutions is better communicate about the value proposition. We have to deliver on the value proposition. And, as we've talked about, I believe very deeply in our responsibility to provide a well-rounded liberal arts education to our students. And if you come to college and graduate, you expect to get economic benefit, and we should deliver on that. If you ask folks across income, race, and age what they expect from a college education, the number one thing people say, "Good job." Right? And I think that's a reasonable expectation. So one of the reasons we have this effort to make sure that every SUNY undergraduate has an internship experience is because we know having an internship experience increases the likelihood that you will get hired, period. It increases the likelihood that you will get hired quickly, and it increases the likely income at which you will be hired, right? We know that data nationally. So we should be doing more to get every student into an internship experience. That, I think, is part of the public education role over the next decade. And that requires some shifts in thinking, right? Because for some disciplines, it's built in. If you're in a teacher prep program, everybody does student teaching. If you're in a nursing program, everybody does clinical hours. If you're in sociology, it's not as clear what those internship opportunities could or should be, but we have to support our faculty and our students in identifying, oh, I can use my sociology degree and go intern for this nonprofit or this foundation or in the communications office at Google. There are a lot of options, but we have to help students find those. So that's one important role going forward. And then I would also say that public education has a broader economic development responsibility for the state. The bet on quantum is a bet on the pursuit of knowledge. It is also a bet on the idea that quantum could be an economic driver for Long Island.
Mhm.
Similarly, at Binghamton, we are making a big bet on battery technology. We have a Nobel Prize-winning faculty member at Binghamton who focuses on battery technology. We have a number of startups in the southern tier around battery technology. So we're betting on that to be a driver of economic growth for that region of the state. So when I think about our 64 campuses, we have to be helping to grow the companies that are already there, and we have to be preparing students for the jobs of the future, like we are doing in Central New York, where Micron is coming. They're going to bring 50,000 jobs as part of the chip fab and the supply chain companies. I want those folks prepared at SUNY Oswego and at Onondaga Community College, and we're doing everything we can to do that.
Yeah, it's great to hear about. Well, for me, this is a return to public education. So I did all my schooling from grade school to grad school in public school, then was in elite places, and coming back, the mission of a public university, and especially of Stony Brook and SUNY, is so powerful. I talk about our $7,000 a year tuition and what that does for our students and the research that we do and the impact it has, and our healthcare, which is incredible. I mean, not all the schools in SUNY have healthcare, but we have 4 hospitals, Stony Brook Medicine, we have Southampton Hospital near here, uh, and we have mobile healthcare, delivering healthcare where patients are, as a public hospital, as a public institution. And then the economic development, I think, is really important too. When the governor and the legislature invests in SUNY and invests in us, I feel we're obligated to create workforce development and jobs. And as an entrepreneur coming out of Silicon Valley, I mean, I say Long Island's going to be Silicon Island next. We're going to be building up semiconductors and quantum. There's a quantum network running across Long Island today, 5 nodes, quantum networking, the quantum internet of things that is going to connect every quantum device in the world eventually. Starts right here on Long Island between Stony Brook and Brookhaven National Lab. So it is very powerful for me, and I think for you as well, to be back in a public institution. And the story that you told, I just want to say there's a similar one that our wonderful alumni and Speaker of the House, Carl Hastie, says. So Carl got into MIT in Stony Brook, and he went to Stony Brook, and he likes to brag to his Ivy League graduated friends that he's way smarter than them because he got an MIT education at Stony Brook for a fraction of the cost. So that's a great story to tell. But I think it really is true. I mean, I got an amazing education at another great public university, paying my way through college. I couldn't have done that if I was at a private institution. So I think at this moment where higher education is under threat, I think we as public university leaders have an opportunity to talk about the education we provide at a low cost and all of the public good that we do, to also bring up the private universities, because we need them too. I mean, if you look at the research and education the private universities do, that is also essential to the prosperity and security and well-being of our country as a whole. So I think we're in a better position to tell the story, but it has to be about the sector as a whole. One of my favorite, there's 2 things I love when you talk about SUNY. You alluded to one earlier, which is that DEI is in our DNA. I think that's brave to say at this moment in time, and I'm very proud to be in a system that are that articulates that diversity is about excellence. That's what I've seen throughout my career. If you bring in people with diverse perspectives and experiences, you just get better outcomes. And if diverse people aren't included or aren't treated equitably, they can't contribute to their full potential. So you already alluded to that. But the other thing I love that when you talk about SUNY is you describe it as on the move, to summarize your vision for the State University of New York system as a whole. So can you elaborate on your vision for SUNY, how you think about strategic planning at a time of so much disruption and uncertainty in higher ed? I mean, both of us could lose our jobs tomorrow, right? I mean, and that's one of the challenges in higher ed today, and also just headwinds that you can't anticipate. So how do you do strategic planning? And it's a bit of a selfish question because I'm also doing the same thing at this moment in time for Stony Brook.
Yeah, let me say one word about the DI and our DNA point. So week before last, we were hosting one of our SUNY alums who just won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry.
That deserves
Yeah.
a round of applause.
It's an amazing story. I'll try to say it briefly. So he grew up in a refugee camp in Jordan. Came to the United States because his father, who was a butcher, wanted his son to have opportunity. He came at like 16. So similar story to yours. He went to Hudson Valley Community College and talked himself into the school. Like, he didn't have a high school diploma, but he said, let me take classes and you'll see that I can do the work. He did. He started taking classes and they allowed him to enroll as a matriculated student. He got his degree at Hudson Valley Community College. He then transferred to UAlbany, got his bachelor's there, went to University of Illinois, and then ended up teaching at UC Berkeley. The chemistry work that he does is about molecules. He's fascinated by the structure of molecules. And this is how it ties back to diversity. So he's in his lab with one of his grad students, and they built this elaborate molecule that was this beautiful crystal inside of a liquid. But when you took it out of the liquid, it basically turned to dust. And so his student says, this is a failed experiment. And he says to the student, no, I want you to study the structure of it while it's in the liquid. I think there's something here. And what he saw, which ultimately led to the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, was that this molecule could be used to get water from desert air.
Oh, wow.
And why did he see that? And this goes to the why DI and excellence go together. Part of why he saw that is in the refugee camp where he grew up, they didn't have running water. The water would come once a day. And you'd grab up all your containers and you'd get as much water as you could. And so for him, he was thinking about, right, because of his lived experience, he was thinking about what a difference it would make if you could get water from the desert air. And so now this discovery that he made is changing the entire field of chemistry.
Wow.
Hence the Nobel Prize. And sitting on a stage just like this with him at Hudson Valley Community College was amazing. Watching the students in the audience look at him, who sat where they sat and won the Nobel Prize in chemistry.
Right.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
Extraordinary. So that to me is a perfect illustration of what we can achieve at SUNY and why DI and excellence go together. So turning to the question of strategic planning, look, our SUNY board and I, from when I started as chancellor, we laid out these 4 pillars around which we organize our work. And I would say this is how I think about strategic planning at SUNY for the system and for campuses. The 4 pillars: student success. We got to continue to make sure that we help our students who start finish. Stony Brook does very well on that front, but there's still more to go,
yeah,
right? There's still more to go. Everybody starts on the first day planning to get a degree. We want to make sure that they do and that we have the supports in place to help them achieve that. And going back to my point about folks should expect a good job when they leave us, we have work to do to make sure that students recognize the full economic benefit of their degree. So student success to me is a central pillar. Second, research and scholarship. That is core to what we do in higher education. The governor charged us with doubling research across the SUNY system. We are making good progress. I'm counting on Stony Brook and quantum and health sciences and AI and marine science. I'm counting on Stony Brook to be a big driver of that.
We won't let you down.
Okay. So to me, that's critical to the strategic plan, and that is about investment. It's also about faculty, right? It's about recruiting the faculty talent. It's about investing in the faculty who are going to be those future Nobel Prize winners, right? Third, diversity, equity, inclusion. again, Stony Brook does very well on that front, but there's more distance to travel, both in terms of students, but also faculty and staff and leadership. And right, we want to make sure that SUNY reflects the best talent, and talent is everywhere.
Yeah.
Right, it's opportunity that isn't, and so we've got to make sure that we're advancing that work, and we want to make sure that students and faculty feel a sense of belonging on campus. That also is part of the DEI work. And then the fourth pillar is economic development and upward mobility. And obviously, Stony Brook's an incredible engine of upward mobility and a crucial part of economic development for Long Island. But you know, one of the big issues for the state right now is the affordability crisis. We should make things more affordable, but we should also help people get good jobs, because you have good jobs, stuff is a lot more affordable than if you don't. And growing those opportunities on Long Island, I think, is critical. So if Stony Brook can, you know, continue to lead the way in all four of those areas, that would be extraordinary. And then I would say, and you know, the climate exchange is a part of this. I think we all have a moral responsibility to respond to the threat that climate change poses to our children and our grandchildren. We've got to do more to make sure that our campuses are sustainable. We've got to drive the research on not only how we advance renewable energy, but how we deal with the consequences of climate change. And one of the things that I think the climate exchange as an asset for Stony Brook and for SUNY can do is help us think about, what does resilience look like as we face these more extreme weather events. You know, New York City, Long Island, places that are very vulnerable to the consequences of flooding. You've literally had campus consequences of flooding. We're going to have to think about that as a society, and what we do about that as sea levels rise because of climate change.
Yeah, absolutely. And the climate exchange was one of the things that attracted me to Stony Brook, because we had beat out all these other top universities, public and private, to be the leading institution in the climate exchange, which is building a solution center on Governor's Island to address the huge existential threat of climate change at speed and scale, unlocking partnerships with universities and companies and philanthropists. And the three pillars, you mentioned one, urban resilience. What better place to study and train the workforce on urban resilience than an island in the middle of New York City Harbor? Climate finance. How do you finance the road to net zero? And how do you deal with the climate disruptions in finance? You look at supply chain and electricity and basic needs. And then the third one is data. At a time when data is gold, is everything, we need to have the data to develop the models to understand how climate is changing and do predictions. All of those are part of the mission of the climate exchange, which is a really exciting thing for Stony Brook to lead, and also to bring in the other SUNY campuses and do workforce development and develop technologies around climate change mitigation. So it's a very exciting part of Stony Brook's mission as well. Here's my last question, and then we'll open it up to a few from the audience. So you've led at so many different levels in such an extraordinary way, at the classroom level, state, federal, and now university system level. Can you share with us some lessons about leadership that you've learned along the way and across moments of calm and disruption?
Yeah, that's a weighty question. It's two things. One or three. One from President Obama. You know, one of the things that was incredible working for him. You know, a president has to deal with so many issues on a given day. You know, I'd be walking into the office and Susan Rice would be walking out, and you know they were talking about some complex international issue, and yet he'd just have to pivot to the next thing. And he would take back to the residents each night these huge binders of briefing materials. And, you know, we would do these policy memos. And, you know, no matter how good a memo is,
It's not the same.
you always know that, like, there's something at page 7, paragraph 4. It's not your strongest argument. But you figure the guy is dealing with all these international crises. He's probably skimming. It'll be fine. You sit down for the meeting and the president opens the binder. I'd really like to talk about page 7, paragraph 4. Ay, ay, ay. So one thing is just to prepare, right? To be prepared, that to lead well, you need to dive in and learn. You have to be a learner. You have to have the orientation to want to understand, to get under the hood. And I really saw that working with the president and just seeing how he approached the job of being president. Second, one of the things that I think is hardest as a leader is to learn from the critics. It is really easy to kind of assume bad intent on the part of the people who are criticizing you and not hear them. And in these more political jobs, sometimes they're yelling. And so then it's even easier to be like, they're just, angry. They're just angry. But often some of the pearls of wisdom come from listening carefully to the critics, the contrarians, and trying to understand how they came to that view and what the evidence is that they're looking at. Because sometimes it just opens you up to an aspect of a problem or a situation you wouldn't have otherwise seen. And I hope I've gotten better at that. It's a constant discipline that is required to try to do that. The third thing, and I think you exemplify this as a leader. It's one of the things I really enjoy working. One of the reasons I really enjoy working with you is you have to spend time listening to the folks on the ground, the folks who are experiencing it. One of the reasons I love to be on campuses is just talking to students about their experience, talking to faculty members about their experience, and you learn a ton. And one of the challenges of leadership is you get more and more senior, you get further and further away. You can see it sometimes in people's physical offices, You ask, where's the president's office? And they're like, well, you got to go through these 8 chambers before you get to the person, right? And the danger of that is then you don't see the world through the eyes of the people who are impacted by the policies. I remember after the Obama administration, I ran a national civil rights organization. One of the things that we worked on was helping higher ed institutions improve student completion. And we were doing some work with University of Memphis. And they had a policy that if you had a library fine, you could not register for the next semester. So you had students who had a $50 library fine, did not have $50, so they would leave school, taking with them their tuition, their room and board, leaving aside the moral dimensions of it. From a strict dollars and cents perspective, this was a really dumb policy. And they didn't know, right? It was through talking with students, doing exit interviews with students who didn't continue, that they learned about this obstacle. But from the top-down perspective, you could see they're like, well, how do we make sure the fines get paid? We tell them they can't register. They'll pay them. And that makes sense from the top down, but from the bottom up, when a kid is struggling financially and they're not able to pay this fine, so they walk away from college, that's an important story to understand as a leader. Another exercise we did, and President Bonnie here will appreciate this, we had all these 4-year presidents in a room, along with their provosts and their VP for student affairs. And we said, go on your school website and tell me how you would figure out which classes on your community college transcript you would get credit for. people were pulling out their hair. They were taking out their phone. They were calling the registrar. The link is broken. How do I get to this page? Right? But it was about trying to see the world from the perspective of the people who live it every day. And again, a hard thing to do as a leader, to make time for that, but just so important. I know you really bring that energy to your role, and I appreciate it.
I mean, it's been such a joy to engage with our community, for me, in every dimension, especially the students. They're so incredibly inspiring. I have open office hours. Any student can make an appointment, come talk to me. I coach the women's basketball team. I'm out there for all kinds of student events. And you do learn things in talking to the students and that you wouldn't know otherwise. But I have to say the most um, uplifting thing I've learned in talking to our students when I ask them, what can we do better? Uh, they really love Stony Brook and they feel like we're serving them so well. And 18-year-olds are going to tell you what they think, right? The only serious criticism I heard is we should have Chick-fil-A in the dining rooms, but that's okay. We're working on that. So, do you have any final closing thoughts before we wrap up?
Look, I feel blessed that we get to work together. I'm so excited about this week for you and for Stony Brook. It's such a celebration of your extraordinary career, but also a celebration of this extraordinary institution. So it's a privilege to be a little part of that.
It's more than a little part. So thank you. Let me just thank our amazing Chancellor for sharing your powerful journey and your ambitious vision for SUNY and for Stony Brook. Um, I've always been inspired in every conversation that we've had, and this one was certainly even more inspiring because it was so much more personal and in depth on so many topics. And I like to think of being a president as being a student again because I get to learn from all the people around me, and I've learned a lot from you already, and this conversation was part of that. Um, we're also so grateful to you for being such an exceptional supporter to Stony Brook and to me personally. And we're just getting started. It's only been 8 months. I really look forward to a long and fruitful partnership, taking both Stony Brook and the State University of New York system to new heights of excellence and impact. I'm really proud to be part of the system, proud to be part of Team SUNY, and proud to be working with you on articulating the value of public education and making SUNY the exemplar of what it can be. So as we close out our first session of the Southampton Dialogues, I like saying that, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. It's been a truly remarkable and inspiring discussion. And now I'd like to invite everyone to join us for a reception in the lobby. Thank you so much, and let's stay safe.